Today, I'm not going to do any sort of fancy introduction or anything like that because honestly, this video kind of sells itself. So I spoke with Neil Fotre and Brady Nelson, who are the filmmaking team on the low budget indie film Outrage. These two made this film for under $20,000. They were able to pitch it to Netflix and Hulu and several other distributors until they decided to land on indie rights. This is a very long podcast, but you're definitely going to want to watch it from start to end. You don't have to watch it all in one sitting. I'm not going to be upset. This is definitely for you guys because I know most of you are only going to watch bits and pieces of it, but we go into absolutely everything when it comes to the business side of making a $20,000 feature. We talk about working with SAG. We talk about working within your budget. We talk about having a partnership as far as an LLC. We talk about, just everything there is, anything you need to know about making a film. It's going to be in this video. So I don't want to talk any longer. I just want to get right into it. Here is my interview with Neil Fotre and Brady Nelson. Brady, Neil, thank you guys so much for coming on today. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with both of you today. You guys are my first dual interview here, so this is going to be an interesting experience to say the least. Why don't you guys give me a little bit of your background? What is it exactly that you guys do?
Well, I've been in LA. I'm from LA, and I am a filmmaker, writer. I've been writing scripts for 15 years to varying degrees of success. Had some stuff optioned. Been pitching stuff, no shows made or anything, but been making my own projects, culminating in Outrage, which we can talk about later. And otherwise, I do freelance writing on the side and kind of make my way. And we're looking to set up more projects in the future.
My name's Neil Fotre. I'm the executive producer with Brady on Outrage. So my piece in that was, which we'll, obviously get into a little bit later, but I essentially did all the thankless stuff to no acclaim. My background is, I would say, in terms of filmmaking and entertainment, it's definitely a little unorthodox for sure. I spent time in the military for a number of years as an Army officer, and then I spent time in the traditional business corporate world as well. I hold degrees, graduate level degrees in business management, marketing, and journalism, which for Brady and I's collaboration, was kind of paramount in terms of like making that whole thing happen. But to echo with what Brady said, we're business partners, and our plans are obviously kind of to repeat some of the successes that we've had in the last 2 years, and that includes cranking out another film which we're already working on right now. So yeah.
So what's really interesting about the two of you is that I'm able to speak to not only the filmmaker, but, a producer as well. So what I'm really curious about, you guys worked on this film Outrage together. I want to know, how did this collaboration come together? Because Brady, I don't know, I may have missed this in your intro. You didn't, or no, I'm sorry, Neil. Did you say you said you were the executive producer on this film, correct?
Correct.
So how did that relationship kind of start? Like, how did you guys kind of find each other? Because I know for me personally, like, I've produced all my own stuff. I desperately need an executive producer or a producer for my projects in the future. So if you're willing to make no money and, help me out, I'm available to talk. But for real though, like how did this relationship kind of come together?
When I was in the military, I had a very good friend of mine, and we were both, we served in the same unit, which was out of Fort Drum and way up in upstate New York, right? And we were getting discharged at about the same time, and I was, kind of taking more of a traditional path, which was, kind of transitioning in the corporate world. my friend had always wanted to, be a writer and do something in the entertainment world. So he ended up moving out west to Los Angeles. That was back in 2013 time frame. Through him, like in 2014 is when I met Brady, and it was kind of through a mutual friend. So Brady and I had kind of gotten to just know each other on more of just a friendship level over the years. And then fast forward to 2022, same friend that we met through, we were on his bachelor party, which was in Spain. He wanted to run with the Bulls, so we did that. And then, while Brady and I were hanging out in Europe, we were, he's kind of just catching me up on how things were going with him in the realm of screenwriting. And it was a friendly conversation, because it was more or less Brady kind of just venting to me about, his experience with his, generally speaking, poor experience with managers and industry types. I was finishing my my business graduate work at the time. And it kind of naturally, I'd always obviously liked film and scripts. And it just kind of the question kind of just arose, like, hey, do you want to maybe take a crack at, maybe managing my career? And the precipice was ultimately like the different, because my response to that, general question was, I don't have any experience in entertainment. And, Brady's kind of response was, will you care about me? And that's kind of the difference, as opposed to what he, kind of had like experience in the past. So I just sort of went into it at the start from, let's take a look at all the products in terms of writing that Brady had produced over the years, and just really give him a completely fresh set of eyes. Where I, despite the fact that I didn't know any of the entertainment industry protocols, I could look at things a lot more objectively from what I had just been learning in, grad school for the past couple of years, right? Just applying relatively basic systems of client management, partner management, and strategy processes to, what Brady was trying to accomplish. So our relationship actually started as more of a manager client relationship. And then after about a little over a year or so, that's when we had, Brady had a script idea, and that's when we kind of took it to more of the, okay, we're going to make something. And Brady, going off of his past experience in film, he's going to now be a director, and I need to kind of take on this role of an executive producer. So it certainly wasn't it was by no means a it wasn't an email exchange, right? But it was more of a developing process that took, ultimately somewhere around the neighborhood of 16 to 18 months to get to that point, and a number of conversations, and a number of also trying things from a more traditional protocol route of, I'm going to manage his career. He's going to be the client. We're going to try to bring his products to market, to then now we're just going to go ahead and do this completely in-house.
Brady, did you by chance save him from working at a Sbarro's?
100%. No,
I'm hoping. I was hoping you guys would get that joke.
I'm glad you brought that up, Alex.
I'm hoping the rest of you guys got that joke too.
Finally, the truth comes out.
The E from Entourage reference has been brought up in a number of conversations, and while E worked at Sbarro's, I happened to my fun part-time gig. I work at a running store, so it's not
Okay.
it's not all that different.
Yeah, I mean, the relationship really, I think it was pretty ad hoc. Like, I wish I could give kind of rules of thumb about how to recreate such a thing, but I don't know if I can. I think Neil just showed genuine interest in wanting to read my stuff, liked some of it, had some thoughts on things I could do. And I was like, well, I don't know. Do you want it sort of just naturally took this course, and then it adapted depending on kind of what we were doing and what we saw as being fruitful. So once I had this idea of a movie I thought I could really shoot myself, it totally shifted into Neil being an EP and not manager, really. Although, I don't know, it's nebulous, but it sort of adapts depending on the project and what we see as being most fruitful.
Before we move on, I wanted to quickly go over some of the ways that you can support me. The easiest way is subscribing to my channel and watching my latest videos. I've also started a membership program that gives you early access to videos before they go live. It starts at just $3 a month on YouTube and Patreon, and if memberships aren't your thing, you can buy individual posts directly on Patreon without the membership fee. My feature film Cashing Out is available to watch on major platforms like Amazon and Apple TV, and you can even watch for free on platforms like Tubi, Plex, and YouTube. If you want to support directly, there's a pay what you want option on my own OTT platform that starts at just $2. And if you do watch the film, it would mean the world to me to leave a review on IMDb, Letterboxd, or your favorite platform. Lastly, if you're interested in my future film projects, you can sign up for my email list. I have some exciting new films that I can't wait to share with you all. All of these items will be linked in the description below. Thank you so much for the support. Now let's get back to the show. So you had mentioned to me before we started talking that you've been writing, well, and during the interview too, that you've been writing for 15 years. And it's not very often that I get to speak with people kind of in the weeds as far as like, you know, they're working in Hollywood and all of this. You mentioned that your work hasn't been bought, but it's been, or it hasn't been produced, but it's been optioned. What exactly does it mean for a script or a pitch or anything like that to get optioned, and kind of walk me through that process a little bit?
Well, it can mean different things. For the most part now, it means less than it used to. I mean, if you talk to like older screenwriters, we'll say, guys who were like working in the 90s or like the early aughts, you know, or before that, an option agreement used to mean like you're getting some money. This producer really seriously, you know, he's committing some amount of resources to this script in particular. And you might have rewrites even or something. He's going to take it out. She's going to take it out. They're going to try and make moves with it. I mean, nowadays, just with where the industry's at, I don't think anybody gets money for an option. And, you know, it's more like, we'll see what'll happen. And I was sort of when I had things get optioned, it was sort of on the cusp of like this switch. So I had a show that a producer liked that was part of a reality company that wanted to make a switch into scripted, and they liked my idea. And, you know, he had revs at William Morris, and he was able through them to kind of actually, so he optioned it from me. They took it out and we pitched it. I helped build the pitch packet and what's called like a rip reel, which is at the time, I mean, now you would maybe do this differently, although I don't know, but you would pull stuff from movies or TV shows that kind of fit the vibe of your thing. And you basically make like a trailer for what the show could be to use in the pitch. So I helped make that. And this guy had a connection to Casey Affleck where he could get Casey Affleck to read narration, which was super cool for me. I mean, I basically wrote narration for this rip reel for Casey Affleck. Sadly, the show didn't go anywhere. I mean, as these things go, you're kind of at the whims of the executives and what they think, you know, what's their slate? What do they think they want? Blah, blah, blah. But that's pretty much the process. I mean, if a producer likes your thing, they make an offer. Nowadays, sadly, there's not often money involved, even if you're like a known writer, you know, and at least that's what I've been reading. But they, for some amount of time, we'll say like 6 months, they have the option, the right to take your thing out and see if they can make moves with it and get something done. That's essentially it. It means you're like, you got a ticket to ride, but you're not sure if the ride's actually going to go anywhere.
You mentioned that you're freelancing a lot. So what is your kind of, I don't know how else to frame this question. What does your life kind of look like right now as a writer?
I've moved into other things, so that should tell you some, I mean, like I directed this movie and did a bunch of the other jobs on it. So I think just being a writer is a difficult road if you want to be just a screenwriter. I mean, I do like copywriting and even operations management for like a marketing firm. And I know other screenwriters who do copywriting now to like make ends meet. And I've done YouTube script writing, and I'm getting into making. I mean, Neil and I are getting into making YouTube videos as well, because that I think is a path that is worth going into, worth chasing now. So I think there's a lot of power in knowing how to tell a good story and knowing how to write well. But I think, at least at the moment, it really helps to augment that with other skills, and that actually is great anyway, because the truth is, when you're just a screenwriter, your project is not in your control. I mean, if you care about what you wrote, oftentimes it's going to get stepped on countless ways before it ever gets on screen if you're not also performing other roles on the project, right? And this is like a tale as old as Hollywood. I mean, there's been screenwriters griping about how they messed up this and that thing, but it's a tale that old because it's true. So I would say now more than ever, but like especially now, just if you care about your project, if you care about telling your story, it helps to have other skills you can bring to the table. And really, I mean, in our experience, I think it helps to be able to just do it yourself.
The number is umpteen, the amount of conversations Brady and I had about writing as a career, writing as a profession, and how are you able to accomplish that in a successful way. And, even if your success, it has to be defined, right? Like, what does it mean to be a successful writer? And that, the easiest way to look at it from, say, a financial standpoint or a business standpoint is, does your writing career afford you, a modest quality of life, right? Does it keep the lights on, and unfortunately, what Brady was talking about is you have there are a lot of writers that are great at writing and can make a great screenplay or any other type of written genre of work, but unfortunately that's the only thing they know how to do. And then, like Brady was saying, then you're sort of at the whim of the industry types that come in and could, maybe they change things for the better and open up opportunities, but it's also a situation where these folks can get, writers can get easily taken advantage of too at the same time, because they just simply don't know the wiser. I was a journalist for a period of time in my life, and I kind of saw this firsthand. And having been a working writer myself in a different industry, the one thing that Brady and I could easily, connect with was that autonomy is one of the best luxuries you can have, and being able to control everything from, the creative aspect to, creating, making sure it's always going to be your words on paper, and then obviously trying to, bring that to a final product and then bring that final product to life. The entertainment industry, as I've learned in recent years, and Brady's navigated for a little bit longer, is the very nebulous industry. And unfortunately, the way it's evolved is, it's only a small percentage of writers out there that can just be writers, right? Like that old sort of trope of, that great writer who's off at their cabin and they can just send copy and then go to the mailbox and collect a nice check, right? Like that definitely still exists, but the number of people that are able to sort of successfully have that, it's definitely not getting bigger, and it's definitely a small chunk of the vast, group of writers out there. So, and sort of the way Brady and I have navigated this whole process is essentially like, how do we sort of make ourselves a Swiss Army knife? Because if we can be skilled and adept in not just the creative aspect, but all these other areas as well, then ultimately the reward for us is we're going to have more autonomy, and that leaves less room for, folks that kind of come in and are able to take a percentage chunk that, generally what writers tend to gripe about, right? Like, how did this guy get 10%? It's the Hollywood accounting type thing. So the way we sort of looked at it is like, let's try to control as much as possible, and let's try to round ourselves out in such a way where, we can kind of maintain as totally as much as we can. I mean, obviously, once we kind of get into when we get into the outrage process, we can talk about things that, like, yes, there was, we did have to bring people in that, we didn't have the skill sets for, right? Like, there is still, Brady and I kind of use the term, like, you're still going to have to play the Hollywood game in certain areas, and with certain elements. And that does involve bringing in people that are just going to be able to fill those gaps that wouldn't be pertinent for us to be able to do ourselves.
So this is probably going to be a multiple answer question. Like, I don't even know how to frame the question, because like I'm just like, I got so much on my mind right now. But so I graduated college in 2013, right? And I had no real interest in moving to Los Angeles, because like I just thought that, when you go to a place like that, it's hard to stand out, right? And while I felt like I was pretty good at what I did, I don't know if I thought that I was good enough to stand out. So like, I've always kind of made it my mantra that I'm like, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to do things kind of my way. Like, in taking kind of ownership of my projects was really important to me. Now, I've been doing that since 2012, 2013, whatever. But I kind of did that because I was a bit naive. Like, I would have had no idea that the industry kind of would have shifted the way it has at this point right now. Now, what I'm curious about from both your perspectives, because you're both in two different locations. Brady, you're in Los Angeles. Neil, you're in Chicago. What is your kind of outlook on just everything that's happening right now, like compared to when you guys were starting to what it is now? And what do you think is kind of the best path moving forward to try to find, like, even if you're not trying to make this a full-time career per se, because I feel like that's getting harder. Like, there's a lot of filmmakers who do it, and I think you need a lot of volume in order to do that. But let's say you can't do volume right now. Like, as far as I know, you guys just have the one movie right now, so you guys don't have like a giant library like some of the other filmmakers who I've talked to. So what is your guys' kind of outlook there? Like, with you being in Chicago, you being in Los Angeles, like, what are your kind of thoughts kind of in general here on just the future?
That'll be a multi-part question, probably. That is a great question. It's also, I mean, it's kind of the $1 million question, right? What'll the future be? Yeah, I mean, just to start with, speaking to the distance between he and I, we didn't find that to be much of a problem at all, actually, in producing this, or when it came to, I'll say, like, the sales approach to Hollywood when we were taking scripts out, which, in some fashion we'll probably still do. Because whether it's after COVID or not, I don't know, but a lot is just done over email anyway. And at least from what I understand, even pitch meetings now often are done over Zoom. So doesn't really make that big a difference for Neil and he could fly in if he needed to, if there was some sort of meeting where it was really important for him to be here. And in some ways, I would say it even helped because, with Outrage, it was a pretty small, tight set. It was helpful to like limit the number of people that were there. And I know Neil wanted to come out. I even offered to fly him out here at one point, but he didn't actually need to be there. And it kind of helps keep things focused. So at least for that part, I don't think the distance matters as much anymore. I think one thing too, when it comes to being somewhere else trying to make your film or films, is that not a lot of shooting is actually done in Los Angeles anymore. I mean, you can read the trades, a lot of griping about that, right? And this has been a trend for a while. There's all sorts of tax incentives from other states, other countries, ways to kind of get money that you can't really do in California. So I think one possible future that we seem to be going towards is the shooting being done often somewhere else, right? And I don't know in Illinois what kind of credits they might have, but I know Louisiana, Georgia, even New York, they shoot in Toronto all the time because there's great tax credits. I mean, I think the shooting is being offloaded elsewhere, and Hollywood is sort of turning into this, like, turning more and more. I mean, it probably already was like this, but the place where maybe you try to get the money, it's like in a sort of like they're like the VCs of Hollywood, right? If you can get money, there's financing here, maybe you have to pitch people here, but the actual shooting is done elsewhere. And the more like your money can go towards paying yourself as the professional, I guess, and your crew and everything, and you can keep the actual production costs down, the more viable it is, right? The less you have to depend on getting large amounts of money, or like having to get a studio to sign off or whatever. And that frees up a lot. That gives you the ability to really make what you want and kind of stick to your vision, right? So I have a hope that in some sense that's where things are going. I mean, we can talk at some point maybe about technology changes too, because that's a huge thing here, AI and whatnot. I may be contrarian opinion on where this can go that's more optimistic. And it is with that in mind. I think anything that frees up the ability of indie filmmakers to make their own stuff, I think is good.
Kind of going back to when you were adding some context here, Alex, about how you made the decision, I'm not going to move out to Los Angeles back in 2013. I can tell you right now, whether that was good or bad, or maybe you thought you're naive, look, you can look at the past all you want, right? But it's already done and over. I can affirmatively tell you, so since 2013, that's 12 years has gone by. There's plenty of writers, or want to be professional writers who moved out to Los Angeles in 2013 who are still out there, and you're not going to find anything from them. Granted, there are there's other people who did make it happen. And it's not even like with Los Angeles as an entity of the entertainment industry. Is it very positive to kind of have a home base out there so you can do the networking and meet folks that could potentially be net positives for a project for you? Yes, absolutely. But the thing is if you're not doing that, then it doesn't matter anyway, right? Like if you're not going to, kind of go out there with I'm going to not only just write mindset, but I need to also like network, learn more about the industry, maybe work not necessarily as a writer on a set, but maybe you're just holding a boom mic or something just to, see the process, right? If you're not doing any of those things, then living out there is, you'll get some sunny weather, and some high taxes. And that's kind of about it. I mean, the town is trickled with people who've been out there for 10, 15, 20 plus years, and you can't find any of their stuff. So, not to, make you feel better, but I don't think you should beat yourself up about it if you wanted to, stay. Brady and I, there was a time in our relationship, from a professional standpoint, before we'd even talked about making the movie, where I was like, you know what, let me actually do like a hard, analysis here of, is it actually better for me to relocate to Los Angeles, right? And for a number of months, I talked to a number of people, right, within the industry, either from a creative side or an operations side. And ultimately, I landed on the decision that it really doesn't make a difference for me in my personal situation and, the professional situation that Brady and I had. That being said, Brady's originally from Southern California, right? So it's home for him. Is it a benefit to have him out there? Sure. It doesn't hurt at all, right? I can tell, the joke that he and I talk about is which I tend to echo, is I'm like, I would like to spend the least amount of time in Los Angeles as possible, but I never have an issue if, like I said, if I need to be out there, then sure, I'll go out there for the time being and then, be back. Brady touched on this as well because of obviously there are a lot of negative things about the pandemic and everything, but everybody a positive thing in a way in this subtext was that everybody became very comfortable with conducting contract business partnership meetings virtually, so I think in my opinion, for indie filmmakers, for people wanting to get into this, it's so easy to say, to kind of go back on this trope of like, oh man, the industry, it's just so hard to break into and it's shrinking to some degree. And, I'm not going to tell that person that they're wrong, but there's there are a lot of opportunities for indie folks or people who are just, trying to get into this, if they just kind of utilize a lot of the assets that are readily available, like technology, right? Brady talked about AI, which we can even talk about more. That's, kind of, we both share somewhat of a contrarian, view on incorporating that into filmmaking. But ultimately, a lot of this stuff is actually, in our opinion, it's opened up more possibilities. Now, the bummer of it all is like, is somebody gonna immediately throw you some money, right? No, like that's not gonna happen. So you kind of have to, you're putting the chips in on yourself a little bit here, and everyone's financial situation is obviously different. I came from a middle class background. My parent, my dad was an engineer, my mom was a nurse, right? Like, I'm not there. There's the reason why it was great for me to get degrees, but I needed the GI Bill to do so. So there is an aspect where, a lot of this stuff will, especially when you're first starting out, needs to be self-financed, but it doesn't take away from the fact that like you don't have to follow the traditional protocol path, to do something in the entertainment industry, which is, trying to get yourself a manager or an agent or both, and then, kind of leaving your career into their hands. Like you can do a lot of this stuff on your own, utilizing, something as simple as like a cell phone, right? As like a starter project or, a YouTube channel. I mean, Alex, you're a great example of, a YouTube channel that, you might not have 1 million subscribers, but you got plenty of people who are watching it, and you got plenty of people who are interested in the same stuff, and they're all trying to learn about the same things, and no matter what backgrounds the folks or your audience is coming from, everybody can always sort of agree upon the same precipice of like, well, hey, what are other opportunities? How do we utilize this stuff? Because we all sort of want to do the same thing, right? Which is turn the written word into something we can all sort of watch on screen.
Yeah, I'll qualify something real quick, just in case we're going to move on to defend Los Angeles a little bit, and because I think, this is important for anyone trying to recreate something somewhere else. One real advantage that we had shooting in Los Angeles, the fact that I'm in Los Angeles, was just like the pool of talent I could call on to help me make my movie, right? So we couldn't have done it without my DP, who's like in the union, great DP guy, a friend from high school. My sound designer, a friend from college, lives in LA. LA still does, and the actors. I mean, the actors, most of them were in LA already, so it made it very easy. And they're professional actors, right? You're not always going to be able to find that elsewhere, but you might be able to fly the actors in, or so one of them was living in Atlanta and flew in himself, which was amazing. And if you get people passionate enough about your project, you could probably do that from Los Angeles to wherever you are. But what you want to do is, wherever you're at, I think you want to try and have a pool of people you can call upon when you do have that project. You want to go for it. And that isn't always easy to recreate somewhere else because, even though it's trending away from this, Los Angeles still has a lot of people who are pros as sound designers or cinematographers, right? And so that was a real advantage to being here.
So to transition a little bit into your guys' film Outrage, you told me in your initial email that you guys transitioned from working with production companies and pitching to them to just making your own film. So was this film kind of the start of that? Like, can you just walk me through that a little bit? How did pitching to production companies and all that work beforehand?
Well, it was just scripts of mine. I mean, I had pitched to companies or channels before with just projects that I had that would require a large budget, and with the strike and with COVID and whatnot, it just, that became, I was literally told, we were both literally told by one company we were talking to, we're not looking anymore. We're just going to make what we already had on the slate. We liked your thing because I had pitched to them before and they liked it, but, we're just not in the market anymore. And that was just the case all over the place. And, as a screenwriter, that's very, dispiriting, right? I mean, what are you supposed to do with that? And I just had this idea. And the more I thought about it, I got excited because I thought I could make this. This is not something that's going to take a ton of money. And I think it's very topical. I think I can do a good job with this. And this is the first project we just said, let's just go in and do it. We're just going to put our chips on the table and go for it. Which was a big risk, I think, for both of us, but especially for Neil, because I don't think Neil knew whether I could direct anything or do any of this stuff. I had done some smaller projects, so this wasn't my first time directing or first time producing something, or editing short films and a web series and stuff. So I had some projects under my belt that I'd done over the years, but this was definitely the biggest, and I wanted it to be the biggest thing. I wanted to make my first feature. And I was just really excited about this idea. I thought it was great. And I thought I was also excited that I thought I could really pull it off, without having to go to anyone else for support or get the green light from some conference room of executives, and I was happy Neil felt the same way.
Let's talk a little bit more about this film. What is it about? Give me a little bit more background on your guys' film Outrage.
Yeah. Well, so I brought it up. I had this idea. It'll come as a shock to no one, I think, that we live in a pretty messed up political media world at this point, right? And it's been that way for a long time. And the reasons behind that the whole nature of that is just something that interests me. So I've just been reading about media, journalism, propaganda, misinformation, all that stuff for 10 plus years, right? And so I was sort of steeped in just learning about that, knowledge about that. But in October of 23, I read Ryan Holiday's book, Trust Me, I'm Lying. Really his first book. If you don't know Ryan Holiday, he's sort of become this stoicism guru, huge YouTuber, all about stoicism and stuff, which, it's great. But in reality, he started as this marketer for American Eagle, I think, and some other people, Tucker Max of all people. And, 10, 15 years ago, he was basically running these media campaigns where he was hijacking media to market his stuff. And Trust Me, I'm Lying is all about how susceptible the media currently is and the tactics he used to pull this stuff off. So it gets like fairly in the weeds in how this is done. And the more I was reading the book, I had read plenty of other things about that that people do that, manipulate the media. But he actually describes in detail, like methods he used, how they worked, campaigns he ran, how he ran them. And the more I was reading this, it was also, 23, it was about a year ago. The presidential election is sort of ramping up. So that's kind of in the background. And the more I was reading it, I was just like, if someone wanted to swing an election, they wouldn't need more than a couple operators that were savvy and a strategy to run out of like a simple office, using these tactics that Holiday is talking about. And so that kernel, that seed of an idea sort of popped in my head, and the characters kind of fleshed out as I'm continuing to read his book. And I got super excited because I, as a screenwriter, I tend to write kind of big stuff, or not. It's not always easy to write a contained thing, something in one location that's easy to shoot. That isn't like a horror movie or something, someone trapped in a coffin, how does he get out? That kind of thing. And that's not usually something I write. But this excited me because I love the topic. I love the kind of feel how topical it is, and the characters that were arising in my mind. But I also loved that here's something I can actually make. And it makes sense that it would just be in one office with just a few people, and now how would you actually run this kind of media manipulation operation, right? And I talked to Neil about the idea, and he likes the concepts. And over Christmas that year, it's sort of germinating still. And then in January, I just went for it, and I wrote the first draft in a couple weeks and sent it to Neil. And with his journalism background, it was important to me that he kind of give the green light, really, or that he liked it, that it's rang true to him. And it did, which was pretty validating. And so from there, I was like, okay, I told him I want to go for this. Like, let's just do it. In the beginning, I had this idea, I'm going to really do this guerrilla. I'm just going to get some actors, put them in a room. I'm going to shoot it on an iPhone. It'll cost $1,000, I think Neil probably thought that was not going to be true, but what he turned out to be right. Mostly because pretty quickly, I ran it by I had mentioned my friend Dylan, the cinematographer, and I ran it by him, and he really liked the idea. And then when he read the script, I got coffee with him, and he convinced me, we could really make this into a thing. Like I have a nice camera that I just own. All we'll need is some equipment. We could find a good location. You'll have to pay for that, but we don't need to shoot this guerrilla style on an iPhone. Like, we should go for this. And so he really convinced me, like, okay, I'm going to cast this thing right. I'm going to go for great talent. And we started location scouting, finding a gaffer to bring in the equipment. And it was really kind of a mad dash run, because at the time I thought it was super important that we release before the election. So, I wanted to gun for shooting it, editing it, get it out there, get it to festivals as quickly as possible. So I wrote the script in mid-January. We're casting the thing in early February, and we shot in basically a year ago. Like, this time last year, I was on set, we're shooting, and we shot it in 6 days. Which is pretty nuts, but doable just because of the nature of the story. There's a lot of people on laptops, there's a lot happening on computer screens, because there has to be. They're purposely feeding stories, manipulating media stories and whatnot. And so because such a large chunk of the movie is that, we were able to kind of pull off shooting a feature in 6 days.
Since you guys did move so quickly, what factors do you think allowed for you to do everything start to finish in that tight of a deadline?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because I think especially for the folks who are listening to you right now, that they obviously probably want to make something of their own, right? So when Brady had this idea, right, we knew, one, from my lens, I always told Brady, I'm really going to look at, I knew Brady was a good writer, right? Just because when we started working together, I read all of I just told him to send me everything he ever, that he had written, which was a good amount of, material, like dozen, a lot of scripts, right? So I didn't, the writing, whether it was going to be good or not, I wasn't really primarily concerned, but the lens that I was looking at is like, is this marketable, right? Like, are we going to be able to have a product that, people are going to want to consume and, shell out a couple bucks for on a streamer for, because we knew from the get-go, like in the planning phase, we were like, okay, this is not going to be something we're going to be able to have like released on hundreds of screens nationwide in movie theaters, right? And that's not going to happen. So we're going to be writing for streamers, right? So we already sort of have a target, consumable platform, right? So that was in the consideration. Then also, with the idea, Brady was writing the script in such a manner where I was like, you need to, we would talk about this too. I was like, you need to write this in such a way in knowing that we're going to have to do this on a budget that is something that we can take control of and something that we'd be able to finance. Right. So the film, if you want to say like, when does the filmmaking process starts, especially for like an indie filmmaker, it really starts from the conception of the idea and then also the writing of the script as well. Because Brady was saying, we could shoot this all in Los Angeles with the pool of talent that we knew we'd be able to access, which was readily available. But we're like, okay, what's going to make this more feasible for us to make is if he writes it in such a way where it's just in one location, because shooting a one location, for a set is significantly cheaper than having 2 or 3 locations, right? So that was, budgetary concerns right at the beginning from the creation of the script. It was pretty paramount that was already, taken into consideration so that we were even able to make the thing in the first place. My background in media, I knew, having worked in newsrooms myself, which also, as we all know, newsrooms do manipulate politics, right? Depending on which way they're going to manipulate it. I knew that these places, what they looked like, right? They're open air off. It's not like a row of cubes or whatever. You don't need multiple locations for it. And all this stuff legitimately happens on screens, whether it's on social media platforms or exchanges within, various like encrypted apps and stuff where journalists tend to communicate with sources and whatnot. So from the get-go, from the first couple of pages where Brady's writing dialogue and everything like that, we're already thinking like, okay, we need to write this in such a way where it's doable for us.
So moving on to your guys' budget, because you both mentioned that this film was shot for under 20 grand. So question 1 there is, how did you get the money? And 2, how did you guys allocate those resources to maximize your production value?
You're looking at where we got the money now. Just the two. It was.
I kind of figured, but
it was the two of us. So as Brady said, his first budget prediction was $1,000, and I kind of was like, probably not, but I mean, so what we did do was Brady had done some research and saw that SAG had a micro budget agreement that was designed for new filmmakers so that we could utilize SAG talent for projects that were going to be under $20,000. So that was a nice target for us, right? We were like, okay, that gives us room to play with. So we use that as our baseline the entire, way. I mean, there were things, that we knew we were going to have to, spend some, and mind you, we're talking about a production budget, right? So there are things you have to spend money on that's in pre-production that aren't necessary, that are not associated with the actual like making of the project, right? Because we had to create an LLC out of the state of California for the project as well, because we're going to be paying people that are working on our project, and you have to follow the various, these are really good laws that we have in place to make sure you're paying people for labor and whatnot. You're adhering to like union standards and everything. And then obviously there's there's money too that needed to be spent after we had made the product, in post-production, right, as well, when it comes to bringing in people who are going to help us attain a distributor and also help us like market the project as well. Now, having the target, the 20K target was nice, because just for the mental aspect, we could sort of be like, okay, we're going to accept this. We're going to, essentially bet 20 grand on us, and then, the creative work, Brady's creative brain right here. Right. So like that's a great, it truly was sort of a great baseline, for us to follow, at the end of the day, because of, fortunately the success of the movie, we got reclassified as a small budget film because we got a distributor and everything. So, SAG has us classified as within a group of films that have a budget that caps at 300K, right? So somewhat flattering, but also, that means we had to pay some more money too, so that our actors are appropriately compensated with residuals and whatnot. So, as far as getting outside financing, that we had a number of conversations about that, right? And the one thing that Brady and I have always wanted to maintain, as I said previously, is autonomy. And the thing about getting outside investors, right, is outside investors are always going to want to know, well, when am I going to get my money back, and how much am I going to make for, fronting you it, right? Like this is not a new business, right? Like loaning people and expecting more money back. So we knew that if we went down that route, we would definitely lose a certain degree of autonomy, and even though my creative input in this film was relatively minimal, is more of like an advisory role, because the vast majority of the creation of the material came from Brady. I knew that, when investors come in, sometimes they're going to want to, they might want to sort of gear the content to what they also like themselves, right? Which kind of goes counterintuitive if we're making a movie about manipulation in media. Like we didn't want outsiders to sort of manipulate our, Brady's creative vision for the project. So that was kind of part of the reason why we decided, look, why don't we just keep this all of our money? Because then ultimately the buck stops with Brady and I, and we had done a very good job of really defining like our roles, like there are lanes that are only mine, and Brady doesn't mess around with. And then there are lanes that I don't even, I stay away from, because that's Brady's expertise. So it made it. Is it a little more anxiety inducing? Sure. Yeah. It is. But, the payoff is that, it's kind of I'm sure if you talk to any small business owner or entrepreneur, the payoff of kind of running your own ship, captaining, your own ship at sea is, you have less people trying to mess around with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's totally true. Like autonomy, definitely something that we want to maintain as much of going forward. The other truth though is too, ironically at this budget level, yeah, it's not easy to find anybody that wants to give you any money. I kind of tried. I mean, there was one production company I sort of floated like, hey, like, what do you think of this? You want to, thinking like, hey, this isn't that much money. Like, you're not putting much at risk. And they were just like, yeah, we don't mess around with stuff that's like made for that little, the reasoning I'm sure being most of the stuff made at this budget level is kind of new, it's untested talent, right? But it's basically just not easy if you're making something for under 20K to even get any money. So that made things a little clearer as well.
Brady and I ran into a situation where, he was Brady was essentially, we had an industry executive like Brady's work, right? And he's a high level exec at, one of the bigger, I won't say his name or anything, but he's at an agency that represents the bulk of talent, right? So, but we did have an executive say like, I want you to write like a real big budget feature script, and Brady churned that out, and like the reasoning behind that is, when you're making stuff that's, you are dumping millions of, $100+ million movie, right? Like the expectation is that, those movies are going to, make 2 times, 3 times as much back, right? And that's quite a bit of money, so generally speaking, when you're trying to get funding for, something that's under 20,000 or, even under a couple of 100,000, these places aren't, it's like they're not seeing like a 7-figure profit off or an 8-figure profit off of that. And that's going to kind of scare them away, which I'm not disagreeing with that at all. It's tough to, I mean, there's always the Clerks example, right? Like a movie that was made for so little and then just, millions of, blows up, right? Or, like Boondock Saints, right? I mean, Clerks is a better example because it was, made for tens of thousands and made multi millions, but, those are obviously like, they're rare, it's a diamond in the rough kind of situation. So, the entities in the entertainment industry that do the cost benefit analysis on this stuff are kind of model, and they have, these places, they have a lot of smart folks doing this stuff, right? Whose backgrounds are essentially all about like, product evaluation. The probability is not in the favor of the small indie filmmaker, right? At the end of the day, like it's just not, the odds are not great. Which isn't to say that it's not possible, but it does make it excessively harder, even though we had something that, it was a topical subject. It was, the subject matter was out there in the zeitgeist, and it was something that people would definitely be interested in. We did get 3 distribution offers, right? So we knew it was a great idea, but even that being said, securing funding for it would have been almost, a worth our time challenge, right? Like we might have spent too long trying to do it to secure funding as opposed to just working on the project itself.
You said something there, and I don't know whether to ask now or later. So I guess I'm going to ask now, because this is definitely an end of interview question, but I don't want to forget it. But something I've been thinking a lot about, because I used to work at a movie theater. Like before all this, I worked at a movie theater for 13 years. So I kind of saw firsthand like the shift and everything, like from the kind of mid-level budget movies to we're only going to make either, small budget horror movies or massive blockbusters, right? At some point the bubble's going to pop. Like there's a bubble in Hollywood, whether people say there is or not, because there's no way that Hollywood can continue to make $400 million movies and churn a profit, right? So I get the, we need to spend this much to make this much kind of thing. So Brady, especially your opinion, but both of you definitely, what is your kind of opinion there as far as sustainability in Hollywood and where it goes? Because like you mentioned, these production companies, they don't want to make these movies because obviously they have in their mind, if we make this size budget movie, we expect this size return due to comps, right? Comparable movies that have done similar business, right? So I guess the question is like, where does it go from here? Like what happens?
Yeah, that's a great one. It's one we talk about all the time. I'm of course like super interested in this question. I'll say I've thought that, about the $400 million aspect, I've thought that since the first Avengers movie that this bubble couldn't keep going. I'll call it the comic book bubble, but the IP bubble, right? We're only going to bet huge on projects that have an inbuilt audience. And clearly, in this case, I agree with you. It's a bubble, but what's the Maynard Keynes quote? Like the market can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. Clearly this bubble can just keep, who knows when it pops? I think it will pop, but it's unclear sort of when. I think you're seeing it sort of flirt with popping from time to time. Over the past couple of years, less of these projects are making the kind of money Hollywood wants them to make. But it has led, like you said, to this, there's like no middle and there's just these huge projects and then small, but for Hollywood, small is like, low seven figures, like a couple $1,000,000, right? So anything under $1 million is like tiny. Like the SAG agreement that we now operate under is the ultra low budget agreement for anything that's 300 or, so that shows you the mindset, right? So yeah, anything made for like under $1 million, it's just hard to get, or really under, 100K probably. I don't know. The numbers, it's a little nebulous, but anything that's pretty low, hard to get funding for. Where do I see it going? If you are lucky enough to be passionate about horror as a genre, right, and you're really steeped in it, always a great place to start, I would say, for anybody who's like in indie film, because people might actually fund that. You can actually make a pretty entertaining horror movie that there's a built-in audience for very little money. And it has a history of showing returns. The horror fandom doesn't mind as much what the budget is, as long as it kind of hits that, it tickles that bone for them, or what, I don't know. That's a weird saying, but you know what I'm saying? It's playing the tune they like, then they'll like it. It doesn't matter if it was made for $1,000, right? So if you're passionate about that, great. If you're not passionate about that, I would say don't even bother. That's the camp I've been in until now. I'm not like a huge horror fan, at least not like the slasher stuff or whatever. So I would say my approach, so our approach really is to try and write stuff that has some other feature that stands out. So with Outrage, I think it was how topical it is, and how doable it could be. And then really trying to write it so that there's really interesting roles and you can try to get great actors interested. For any project you want to try and get financing for, I think a great first step is to try and get talent interested that has some kind of name value to it. That's what we're going to try and do moving forward. And would have been happy to with Outrage, but we were moving fast and I was more interested in just making a great movie. I didn't want to take didn't want to spend too much time trying to get talent involved. And unfortunately, we did have someone who was interested. Who's a name, but their schedule was off and we couldn't wait. And I think that's just a great strategy, because if you can get talent interested, and I'm not talking about like, Javier Bardem or something. I just mean like someone who's a recognizable name. They might be like coming up. They've gotten some roles on television shows that are like meaty roles, and they're looking for something that is like a standout thing for them. Like, why would they want to be in your little movie? It would be because there's a lead role for them that's really awesome, right? This character seems great. You want to write something that really, captures their passion. And then with that, I think if you get someone in that way attached, now you can try to get money, because that's going to stand out to an audience. Like, the only thing you might have is the names on the marquee, if it's not a horror movie, and how interesting the subject matter is. I think genre on some level matters. Like, maybe thriller or sci-fi can still work at a lower budget more than, say, like your coming of age drama, but it really depends. I mean, maybe, if the coming of age drama is something that has some feature that really stands out stylistically or something, who knows? I think that's what you want to aim for at this budget level, because you're not going to have the budget for, Bond film kind of locations and moving around a lot, all the things that Hollywood cares about, drawing people into a theater. You have to draw them in with great characters, some kind of name power star, an interesting topic, I think.
I mean, I'll say that I say this with all due respect, because I'm saying this while original Star Wars poster is in the background of my my screen here. But for built-in audiences, you want to follow the nerds, right? So like horror, sci-fi, comic book stuff, right? It's just always consumed. There's always an audience for it, and people just like that stuff, right? And you can do those genres, for folks who are, on the independent side of things. You can do those genres for less than less than $50,000, kind of under a micro budget type of principle that Brady and I followed. And there's going to be people, maybe you might not get millions upon millions of people to watch your stuff, but, tens of thousands is still a respectable thing to say, if you've produced a project that gets that type of viewership. Your question of is this bubble gonna pop? I mean, I guess the answer to that would be, as far as I know, they're still making Fast and the Furious films, and I think they're on like 12 or 13 right now. And those things even cost a bunch of money, right? But they pull in a bunch of money. So I don't, I think until I know, just from like a business operation, just from an operational point of view, because of the cost of some of these movies, hundreds of millions, $500 million, that really is like, these places are going all in, right? And if one of those, I don't think it's going to pop until a big studio or a big production company fails, right? And I think until you have that example for everyone else, where somebody puts $500 million into a movie that they thought, maybe Fast and the Furious 14, right? Like until I don't think it's going to stop until there's, a body to show. Like, we can't do that anymore. Like, look what happened, to Lionsgate or whatever, one of the really big like studio names, right? So I think that's going to keep going until ultimately there's a tangible example of where it just completely bankrupted an organization. That being said, the opportunity to do this stuff is I think there's a lot of opportunity that's out there, for folks to do it, and even starting out as simple as, I'm going to make a YouTube series or something like that. Like at low cost, you're not dealing with a distributor. You don't need an attorney. You don't need an agent. You essentially just need a good, competent crew, right? Of, maybe people, in your network. And then obviously like a good idea to film. There are examples of shows that are on Netflix right now, that have been reviewed, and they started out as just like, oh, well, we're going to just kind of make this, and throw it on our YouTube channel. Right. And then it caught the attention of the right people, and, now it's on the biggest streamer out there. So where everybody, there is no like real answer. You're like, to predict the future of what's going to happen, it's like predicting the weather in a way,
I have a hot take, if you guys don't mind me.
I love a hot
in
take
here for a minute.
love a
All
good
right.
hot take.
You guys cannot respond if you don't want to, because I'm pretty sure nobody in Hollywood's ever going to work with me after I say this. I think that everybody in Hollywood knows that the bubble is coming, because you have to think, like, if the Avengers cost $400 million to make, right? How much of that do you think is just for the talent? You know what I mean? Like the upfront deals and the back end deals, like it's outrageous. So you might be making, like, I know this is extreme, but let's just say the Avengers actually, like, production costs like 50 million to make, right? So you got the other 250, 350 million going just to talent. Now, is that because the talent knows, like, we need to get the good while the gravy train is going? You know what I mean? And the other thing too that I've just kind of noticed, just not even with just this, and this is the first time I'm ever going to get political here on this channel. And this is somebody who, I guess I'm a capitalist, like I invest in the stock market and all that. As soon as a company goes public, I feel like that's when things kind of go downhill a little bit, because it just becomes about making money and not making the best product out there. And, all these big studios, they're all public companies, right? And then you got, like, say what you will about Blumhouse, but Blumhouse has figured out how to make a profit on a small movie without being super greedy. You know what I mean? A24 has done the same thing. Neon's done the same thing. And there's various other studios who have done this. So I think once the bubble does pop, we might not see like the $400 million movie. We may have to go back down to the $100 million movie. I mean, like Oppenheimer, for an example, that's a $100 million movie that made $1 billion at the box office. I'm sure there were most of the people on that project probably took some pay cuts. So it's just like, I feel like it's a lot of greed that is causing all of this. It's just not going to be forever. I think that's ultimately what's going to end up killing everything. And that's why I think I'm so bullish on just like owning your own IP and making your own projects for as little as possible, because at some point that's all that's left, and they're going to need filmmakers who can make content. And I hate using the word content, but content on a dime. I think that's why YouTube is the most watched platform in the world right now, is just because you can make very high viewable content for no money.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot going from what both of you guys were talking about. I mean, going off of that, if you look at it as as an indie filmmaker trying to make your own project or set something up that's pretty low budget, what's your comparative advantage to something that's spending $400 million? I mean, in my opinion, the stuff getting made at that level is pretty ubiquitous. It's kind of boring. I mean, people know what they're getting. There's something comforting about that. So what can you do that's different? What's your advantage compared to that? It's making something interesting. It's making something in a different way. That's, I mean, that is essentially, that's what A24 has turned into, a giant business. It's like, and a brand, right? They're probably like the only company in Hollywood that kind of, other than Disney, that has like a real brand. Like when I say an A24 movie, you kind of know what that is. And they've done that over the past 10 years, 15 years by doing the opposite of what the $400 million crazy Avengers movie is doing, you know? And I think you can take a page from that book and try to make interesting stuff, because I don't know when this bubble will burst. It'll burst. I think Neil is right. Like economically, it'll burst when someone fails in a big way. But I think you're seeing it start to teeter, because like all these things, they might have been interesting when they were new and fresh, and they were doing something that hadn't been done before, but it's been a long time. The Western as a genre was the biggest genre for like 20 years or something in Hollywood, until it just wasn't. It kind of started teetering, and then now, like, it started teetering maybe in the 70s. By the time Unforgiven comes out, that's sort of like the period on that, right? And Unforgiven in the early 90s, 91 or something, kind of that's it. We're done with the Western. I mean, there's a Western every once in a while now, but not what it was. And people move on. And so, yeah, I think that'll play a part in that bubble bursting. But I think the important thing, if you're starting out, if you're like all of us trying to tell your own stories and whatnot, and try to make a living off of this and create something that has some growth to it, is to be original and try to take a chance and like focus on what your advantage is, which is your ability to kind of do something new, and keep the business stuff in mind. I mean, Nolan's a great example. You bring him up, like, even though he's working on these huge Hollywood movies, he let his budget get out of control, right? I mean, he's sort of able to maintain the control that he does within that system because he really makes something on a budget and keeps it tight, and I think if you keep that in mind at our level, that's amazing, because you'll be able to actually afford it, for one thing. And you might, you'll be able to keep the kind of control and like get investor attention later on by showing you have self-discipline with that, and you're not doing the scammy Hollywood accounting stuff.
Proof of concept is people want to see that you can know how to do that, especially if you're talking about, to go back to trying to raise investor money. Investors are going to want to know, they want to see some experience in that, right? Like, they're going to want to see that, like, the folks that they give money to have successfully managed it in the past. It's no different than, if you're hiring somebody for a job, as a, working at a movie theater, it's nice that they like and watch movies, right? So it's definitely, that's a huge part of it. Going off with, like, Brady talked about this thing, with essentially, like, how do you defeat the Goliath, right, of these massive movie productions? Like, how do how do the little guys kind of compete? And, you kind of, I sort of think of, what A24 has done, especially what they were, everybody's paying a lot of attention to them right now, like what they've done in the last few years. But if you kind of go back to where they started, they were, kind of like this Hollywood insurgency, right? Trying to defeat this machine. And that's kind of the mindset you need to sort of take, like, what is, going to be your disruption element, right? Because you're, an indie filmmaker going against a multi-million, forget about $100 million, even if it's just a multi-million-dollar project. I mean, the stuff's really, really stacked against you, but that doesn't mean that you can't be doing something that they're either missing or they've overlooked, or maybe they just don't think is valuable. With our project for Outrage, we did, before, as we were kind of working through the idea, in the early stages of the script writing process, I was trying to really look into see if there was anything out there that kind of focused on the manipulation of media, and then that component into politics, and then that component into actual election meddling, right? There's plenty of like documentary stuff. There's a lot of news stuff about that, like podcasts out there, but there really wasn't like a full blown, like feature film project on that. And that was a big, if you want to call that, our little insurgency to the industry, or our disruption. I mean, that was kind of what helped us also, roll the dominoes, knocking down each other, to have some confidence in making this thing.
Going back to the budget really quick, something I'm really curious about. So when I was making my film, I was getting ready for the distribution process about mid 2019. One thing I kind of debated on was if I should expose the budget. And then eventually, I went on with the YouTube channel and all that. I kind of wore it as a badge of honor. You guys are kind of wearing it as a badge of honor too. And I'm starting to notice it a lot more with these kind of smaller projects. Do you think doing that gives you more of a disadvantage or an advantage in this space nowadays?
That's a good question. I don't know. I would guess advantage. I mean, I don't see the disadvantage in it. I mean, at the very least, you can kind of see what's possible at this budget level, I think. And if nothing else, I hope that, that motivates other filmmakers to like take their shot and go for it. And, even if your movie didn't look great, if you're like, well, I made it for $5, it's like, oh, well, now it looks pretty good. Like, I don't know. What's the disadvantage? I mean, if you're at this budget level, I mean, like with big Hollywood movies, they don't always like revealing what the budget is because they don't want you to be able to calculate how much money they lost if it doesn't do well, but at our budget level, I mean, why not be honest? I think it is kind of a bit of a calling card to be like, hey, like, look at what I could do with X amount of, dollars.
You don't think it turns people off from watching it, perhaps?
It definitely might, but I think I'm about to finish the sentence that probably those people wouldn't even be interested in the movie anyway. They're not even looking to watch indie film. I mean, I will say in our individual situation, we certainly wear the budget to the product that we were able to create as definitely like, check out what we did, right? It's definitely a badge of honor for us. One of the, we've shown this movie to industry types and so on. And, one of the nicer compliments we've gotten is that it looks like it was created for, 10 times as much, right? Like they almost have a hard time believing that our budget was, under 20K. At the same time, are there negatives in revealing the budget if you're, looking to get like your project acquired? Yeah, that's definitely there. There are some negatives to transparency in that regard. I definitely don't disagree, but in our case, we were just like, you know what, like we thought we did a pretty great job, and especially the crew did a great job, with what was available for us financially. And like I said, when you have someone who, we had an industry employee, an industry employee tell us like, yeah, this movie looks like it was made for, a couple $100,000. We're like, oh, that makes us feel pretty good.
You guys mentioned that you use SAG, and you kind of had to transition from I think it's their under 20K budget limit to kind of over that. So how did you guys secure that? Like, what did that process look like? Because I haven't actually talked to anybody who's worked with SAG yet. So I'm really curious just from my own perspective, how that kind of process worked. And I actually talked to a filmmaker recently who kind of had the same issue, because I did not know that the whatever that the smallest budget level was, that you can't make money on the movie or find distribution. So what was kind of the challenges there from moving, from that budget level to the next one, so you could actually secure distribution?
Frankly, it was being unprepared. So we just didn't realize that they were going to kind of enforce that aspect of it. But I'll say, if you are prepared, I think the micro budget agreement, it's really more like a waiver, to be honest. It allows you to make something for, less than 20K with SAG talent, but not have to go through all the hoops that SAG usually presents. Usually you have to contribute to their healthcare and their pension and stuff. You need to liaise with someone there that, you have to work with and make sure you're meeting all these things. And there's minimums you have to meet and blah, blah, blah. And the micro budget agreement really frees you up if you can make something for less than 20K, because you don't have to do any of that stuff. And it's easier if you go in prepared. So your production is going to be less. You're going to not go past the 20K mark. If we had just set some money aside and known hey, we're going to have to pay this to make up the difference with the new agreement later on, but we know we're going to make this for this budget, and we know we're confident we can get a distribution offer, I think you'd be fine. You just have to be prepared to do that. And, I don't know if they want you to play the game that way. I don't see what's wrong with it though, because, the truth is we did not make a movie for more than 20K, and yet we still had to pay like we did simply because we want to, try and make some money on this thing. So I don't see what's wrong just sort of being prepared for that. It frees you up and gives you access to some great actors.
The big thing with SAG to understand, they're a guild, right? They're not a lot of people associate them as being a union, which, by definition they're not. It's a different type of entity. I mean, what they're trying to do is obviously take care of their members, and they're obviously trying to make sure, that their members get paid appropriately, which they're definitely great about defining, hey, these are the minimums and everything like that. That was just an overall learning point, because you do have to communicate with, SAG's going to kind of get all your paperwork. They're going to get all your stuff, to make sure they're on the same page. The big thing with SAG is, and I think what we would have done differently if we, had more experience dealing with them would just allow for more of a buffer of a timeline with them, because it's not just oh, hey, we're going to do one phone call and everything, is going to be tidied up in, 2 to 5 business days. The process takes a little more communication, and it's not an expedited process at all. It takes some time. So allowing, some time to lead time, to work with them. And it's also better for them as well. They are, Brady can kind of speak to this as well. They, it's not like they're not going to return your calls, type deal. They do communicate, pretty well, but at the same time, you do have to kind of stay on top of the process, but allow for, and like I said, it's not like we'll start the SAG process on Monday and be done by Friday. That's not. No.
Curious then, with the micro budget, if that's the one I'm thinking of, the under 20,000, what exactly are you allowed to do? Because it kind of I'm getting the impression that the only thing you can do is just kind of show it on YouTube, I guess, if you don't monetize. What exactly can you show it? Because obviously the point of making a film or a show or whatever is to get it seen, right? So how can you distribute it, I guess, without making money?
So you can make money. It's just you depend entirely on what's called AVOD, so advertising video on demand. So yes, YouTube, but also Tubi. There are channels you could, and we looked at distributors who would maybe consider only releasing on places like Tubi. We didn't want to limit ourselves to that, because under the micro budget agreement, that you will be limited to that.
I mean, it limits you definitely, but it's something.
No, it's not that. I mean, kind of like you had said previously, Alex, right? The majority of people are consuming their visual content on YouTube, right? I mean, that's where most of the eyes are. you can sort of feel like a needle in a stack of needles on YouTube. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you want your work to be seen, there's nothing wrong with putting it on YouTube, or, you know, other social media platforms have the ability for you to upload, you know, pretty long form, you know, like a full length feature film, right? You know, you got Rumble now that's kind of trying to compete with YouTube. X, you can upload, you know, feature, you know, you can upload a movie on X if you want now as well. So I micro budget agreement, it allows you the ability to pull some great talent for sure. And that's where the benefit is, obviously, is the access of, you know, the actors, right? And I mean, we had 4 major roles in our film, right? I mean, how many submissions did we get, Brady, for?
Literally thousands per role. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much where, you know, we'd love to give everybody a fair look and a fair shake, but it's, you know, we got sprayed. It was like a fire hydrant opened on us, right? So, you know, it is nice having access to SAG talent, you know, because, you know, obviously these people have, you know, some work experience as well. So while there were instances, obviously, where the micro budget agreement was a bit of, you know, and us being not fully antiquated with the agreement of itself, like, yeah, there were some times where we were like, oh, this is kind of a bit of a thorn in our side, you know, but at the positives outweighed that, you know, for sure. And it's allowed us to, you know, think about ways to make a better project, you know, this year.
In terms of switching from one budget level to another, how much did that eat into your guys' initial budget? Like, were you always kind of set on 20,000 and then you kind of had to, like, this just took a chunk out of it because you had to pay people a little bit more? Or I know, like, at least I've heard through the grapevine, like, you have to use a specific payroll service and then you're paying into all those different benefits like you mentioned. How much did that eat into your budget, and what was the process of transitioning like?
It was a surprise.
It can depend, obviously, on how many actors you're using, right? So for us, because it was, you know, 4, is we were able to, it wasn't like a huge punch to the gut, but, you know, it wasn't a love tap.
I'll say one benefit is, so if you make a micro budget thinking you'll want to release on, say, Amazon for TVOD transactional, so you can have people buy or rent the movie, and you go in prepared, there's the advantage to doing it that way rather than just working under the other agreement from the beginning, is you don't have to go through all the hoops that SAG would push you through. So whatever the payroll service thing is, I mean, we ended up just having to pay. We didn't have to go through all that during production when you want to spend time kind of focusing on all these other things, you know? We just focused on it at the end. We just had to make the one payment, boom, that's done, right? Yeah, so, you know, I don't know if they like that. I don't know if they want you to think that way, but they've constructed it in such a way where it might make sense if you're doing something that you know is going to be under 20K to do it that way, you know? Just be prepared for the final payment at the end. Rid yourself of having, like I said, it's called an agreement, but it's really more like a micro budget waiver. You know, I mean, it's basically just the actors sign it, like on it, it says, like, you know, they don't have to do all the stuff. Like, you're basically signing off that, like, they're not going to do anything we usually make us said to, you know? And, you know, at that low a budget, I mean, if realistically you're making something for under 20K, it's sort of too much of a burden to have to go through all the stuff. SAG would, you know, it's better to kind of backload that. So when you've already sort of gone through post, you know, you have a movie that could work, or you feel confident that it could work on TVOD, you know, rather than kind of getting lost in the jungle of going back and forth with them during production.
How does the budgeting work? Like, do you just, like, show them your QuickBooks account and be like, here's my bank account. It says 20,000 and I pinky promise swear I'm going to, lead to that. Like, do you need to, like have like, traditionally like a line producer would, pull out a budget or something like that. Like how does that process kind of work so they know you're kind of being honest there about what you're saying?
Internally, we did the budget the old fashioned way, right? Like, I maintained the budget just using Microsoft Excel and then annotated every single line item, right? Which was easier for us to do as well because we set up a LLC to do all of this, right? So we had, essentially a business savings account, a checking account, and then, some cards associated with that account just so we could monitor it. We paid folks via mailing them a check, right? The old fashioned way, because it was also better for our records. So with SAG, they're not going to come on, or at least in our situation, they didn't come down on us or anything like that, like an IRS agent, like trying to bang down our door. But we were fully prepared if needed, to show them annotated receipts, right? Dates, times, what it was used for, and then we had it, I set it up in such a way where it's like, I can prove to you this is exactly how much we spent on production. Anything else that was spent doesn't relate to the actual movie production budget. It just relates to other things that we had to pay for, that were in pre-production or after the fact, right? That didn't have anything to do with the micro budget agreement in and of itself.
So you didn't have to present them like a budget or anything, and they didn't like check afterwards to make sure you actually, like, I know you said like you kept a good records of everything in case they did audit you for some reason. I don't know if SAG audits, but let's just say that they did. Like you didn't have to present like any formal paperwork. They just it's kind of like a trust agreement almost, it's sounding like.
There was no like before and after. Like when we had to upgrade the agreement, we just had to show what we had spent, and that, basically I think they just wanted to make sure, I don't know, that we had made the thing for $1 million and we're claiming otherwise, right? Like they didn't ask for, when we signed up for the micro budget agreement, they didn't ask for a preliminary budget or anything. So there was nothing to like match it to. They just asked for, okay, what did you end up actually making this for? Where did the money go? Along with some other stuff like, I don't remember, various work agreements we had with the actors. They wanted to make sure we had already paid the actors, that, we weren't, I don't know, playing some weird game there. So, that was all easy to do because we had set this up so that, like Neil said, everything was already, it was just available to us to easily show, like, yes, we mailed these checks. These actors already got paid what I said they got paid. That was all fairly painless. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have proof of, finalized transactions, right? So, I mean, I would say for, your audience and stuff, like I said, in our situation, we weren't put under a microscope. We did have to provide material, like Brady said, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be within their means to say like, wait a minute, let's, let's pull the curtains apart here and kind of see. So we were prepared, if needed, if that was to potentially happen.
So if you spent, say, like $23,000 instead of 20, do you think they would come after you?
No idea.
The rules, according to their rules, yeah, they'll reclassify you, right? But there's arguments. There's always kind of like arguments to be made because, it's all about what was the money spent on the actual production of the film. I mean, what we do with other money in terms of, like, for example, we wanted to we had like a wrap party, for the actors and the crew and stuff that we'd spent a couple $100 on, just to kind of thank everybody for working on the project. But that had nothing to do with production, type deal. That was just something we wanted to do. So, do I think they're gonna come after you? I mean, they can, but I mean, they're able to. So I just think for folks out there that are wanting to do this or in the process of doing this, I would say just be prepared. And we always respected the fact that SAG was allowing us access to their pool of talent. And without their talent, we wouldn't have made a great picture. So we always just kind of respected that, and we're gonna play ball, and as long as they're being fair to us, and they were fair to us.
I can't speak for them, obviously. I would say though, my gut feeling is they're more concerned with they just want to make sure, more than likely, that, like I said, you're not ripping everyone off here. I mean, there are some shady productions and producers and stuff. I think they just want to make, if it's you spent 23 and you were working at 20, I mean, maybe they come after, I don't know. But I think they're really more concerned with, some production that's de facto something else. So someone who actually works for a bigger company saying it's a micro budget thing, and then trying to get away with making something for a lot more money than what they're claiming. That's my guess. I mean, again, I don't speak for them, but I'd be surprised if they were, I don't know, really going to done for somebody going 3K over or whatever. But I don't know. And at that point, anyway, if you're only 3K over and they do care about it, then I guess you just go for TVOD, because you're going to have to go under the next, you're going to have to go under the next agreement anyway. And it's not the end of the world,
SAG gods, if you're watching this, I'm only asking questions. I'm not encouraging anyone to do this, but I know somebody's going to ask me, and I'm just asking questions to get answers. So moving on to your guys's, that was awesome. But moving on to your guys's kind of production, what were the biggest problems that kind of came up, and how did you guys solve those issues?
You just run into Murphy's Law stuff when you're doing something like this. Our gaffer's truck broke down the first day, so had to get a U-Haul last minute to have him get all the equipment there. My friend Dylan, the DP, got really sick halfway through production, and just kept going. I mean, what do you do about that? And really, it was just keeping I think it was just keeping eye on the ball, eye on the prize, and having people around who were also committed to trying to make something great, and were, being adaptable a bit and pushing through. I mean, if Dylan hadn't been willing to push through that, I don't know what we would have done, honestly. I caught whatever bug he had the week after we were shooting, and I was done for a week. So the guy is a champion. That's just something that was just him. I mean, I don't know what we would have done if he couldn't have done that. But we went in, he and I had planned the shoot pretty well. And I think good planning makes a lot of difference. Of course, what's the quote? No plan survives contact with the enemy. So things are going to happen. But if you have a good plan, it really helps, and good people you can depend on to get through if something goes haywire.
Because mind you, I was executive producer on a project that is filming, 2 different time zones away from me. Right. And I was successfully able to, kind of have eyes on that whole aspect, even though I'm here in Chicago. But the planning aspect is pretty crucial. Knowing, adhering to a schedule, it sounds so simple, right? But that's the thing that gets fumbled big time, right? And that's what's really going to cost you money too. Especially if, you're paying for a location, making sure to say, to your cast and crew, like, this is what is exactly what's happening during the day, from scene to scene, or, this is when we're going to break. This is, when the morning talk is going to happen, making sure to have that really structured out for every single day of shooting is entirely important. And I'm sure Brady here can second this. You can, a scene to shoot, it can take an hour, right? Even if it's a simple scene, or you could just keep shooting the thing, right? All day long, and you've essentially wasted an entire day on trying to get the best 4 minutes. Brady, and this is obviously where, writer, director comes into play, right? Like you have your talent to work with. You got to get the best you can get out of them in a couple of takes. And then you're just going to have to put some faith into the folks that are going to be editing the project as well, that, because it's not like you can shoot something and always like watch it back and be like, did we get it? Right. So you got to have to put some faith in the people around you too. So you're not spending so much time on stuff. Fortunately, we didn't run into any crushing issues with that. But, I know there was times that, Brady and I would talk at the end of the day and he's like, I wish I could have got this a couple more times, but got to move on.
To take Neil's point here, actually, it was one major benefit was that I knew I was going to edit the movie. So when Dylan and I had spent weeks beforehand planning setups, planning shots, shooting in one location really limited the number of setups, which is just like how many times you have to sort of relight a scene, moving the camera. Dylan was able to light it fairly well enough where you didn't have to spend a super amount of time, like a lot of time switching the setups. But even so, very tight schedule. Neil's totally right. Trying to keep to the schedule was really important because we had only paid for 6 days in this place. We really can't afford to go over. Unclear if we even could. I think they had like another shoot going in there after us. So I really wanted to get it all in those 6 days. And since I was editing, if at any point what Dylan and I hadn't planned or had planned wasn't going to work, I could think of what I know I'm going to need. Like, what's the minimum I need in the edit to like make this scene work at the very least, and then we could at least work to get that. And he and I in the moment could adapt and sort of think like, okay, knowing what our stylistic vision is, where do we want to put the camera to capture what I know I'll need in the edit that fits kind of the overall vision, so either being the editor or thinking as an editor or working closely with the editor, even before shooting or during, having a sense of like what really what you need in an edit. That isn't, you're not always going to have the time or, to do basic coverage. And maybe you don't want to. Like, I don't love basic coverage. You cover the bases, you cover your ass, but it looks boring, right? I think like basic coverage often just looks like television. So if you can think that way though, and you know what an editor needs to at least make a coherent scene, you can build from that. You can adapt, and make something interesting while keeping to a schedule.
Your crew is small. I'm curious, how many people were on your crew? Like, what positions did you have? And what positions, with the knowledge that you guys have now, what positions do you think are kind of essential for the future? Like, is there any like crew positions? Like, obviously the more people, the better, right? But is there anything you wish you really would have had? Like, we probably should have spent the money on this kind of thing. I'm curious about that.
Initially, my co-producer and the acting AD, Mal, really pushed for having a set designer. And I talked to him about that for a while. And that was one that he really felt we needed. Ended up we didn't have the budget for it. And we were lucky that the location Dylan and I had found just naturally had kind of an interesting vibe for what we were doing. And we were able to incorporate a lot of what was just on location to make it interesting enough. I think on a different project or in the future, I would care a lot about having a set designer. We just sort of lucked out, or, we were able to take advantage of the location scouting Dylan and I had already done. Otherwise, yeah, we had a very small crew, and I think that was actually great because it was it was a small movie, and we're only in one location, and really, you just run into a lot of, I guess, have the minimum that you can get away with is kind of my acting methodology right now. I wasn't. One thing I'll say is, and Mal convinced me of this, and I'm really happy that we did it. Script supervisor. I was, our production budget was already getting a little higher than I liked. And he really convinced me that we should have a script supervisor, and we brought someone on, and she was great. And I was very grateful that we did have it, especially because I was also the editor, and being able to work with her notes on like what scenes in the moment I liked, blah, 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 it helped put the movie together, and it helped make sure continuity was maintained. You want someone on set, I think, kind of paying attention to that, and you don't always think beforehand that it's important, but it is.
Anything that can add value, anything that can essentially streamline the organizational aspects is going to be helpful for sure, because that usually gets overlooked, right? Completely. I know that for us on set, we had a couple of people that were, because like a lot of the, Brady was operating on just a couple hours of sleep, every night. It's starting to get tired, right? So like when you have a couple of extra people that are in the mix that are also kind of maintaining the organizational structure of the day and sort of keeping that schedule and timeline in place, that's like super helpful. We fortunately were able to pull that off with a relatively small crew. I mean, we still had more crew than we had actors, right? It was more than double. I know that one thing we would have definitely done from the get-go, and I'll plug our, shout out to our current advertising guy right now, Justin Sparadino with Circus Road Film. He's the one who's helping us market the film right now. We would have had somebody like him, like, before we even started filming the project, because like him and his organization, who we got connected through our entertainment attorney, St. Glenn Reynolds, with the same company name, Circus Road. They're ultimately doing this stuff that we just like don't have time to focus on at all. And it's paramount, and that's the thing that even, I have a formal marketing background. Brady's worked in the corporate world before, but we're kind of, we're obviously so entrenched in the pre-production, production, post-production process that like this vital aspect, we would have definitely jumped on, a lot earlier if we had, kind of the foresight into it. Suppose we just knew better.
So moving on to the AI side of things, because you guys mentioned you did utilize AI. What kind of tools did you guys use to kind of help you guys out? And I guess what's your advice there as far as AI tools in general?
This is a controversial area, I know. For this movie, of course, I'm going to defend my use of it, but the movie could not have existed without it. So when you see it, you'll notice that there's just a lot of stuff happening on computer screens. There's an election going on within the content, the world of the movie. And these people are feeding stories. They're reacting to stories, right? And so I needed a lot of what would maybe be like stock images, right? I needed a lot of images on news sites that had characters that are characters, but they're not really in the movie, so to speak. They're just they're trying to affect the world outside. They're representative of the world outside. So presidential candidates, people on the presidential candidates team, that kind of thing. There is no stock footage that exists for that, right? If I was a Hollywood movie, I would have to hire actors to play basically roles that are extra roles, but I'd have So, there's news articles from the ballroom at the Waldorf in New York, where a candidate's giving a speech to a bunch of, uh, donors. I'd have to rent the ballroom at the Waldorf and fill it with people and have this act. It's basically just impossible. I mean, this would, because the budget would just be gigantic. So instead, I used Midjourney to create these images. I mean, there's a whole process to learning how to use that tool that I'd been teaching myself how to use it, and I took some courses on how to use it. And so, my thinking there is just this movie would not exist. No one would fund this movie if you had to go out and actually pay actors to go do, or not even actors. I mean, basically just people standing around, or, rent out whole spaces and everything. Instead, I used this technology that allowed me to create these images, and create them in a way that looks realistic.
We also use some voice AI too.
We did. I mean, I don't want to give away too much in the movie, but yeah, I used some other tools, 11 Labs for an AI voice. And it's a feature of the movie. AI is a topic in the movie. And so I'm using tools and sort of commenting on the tools at the same time. And really this made what would have had to be millions of dollars into something we could make for under 20K. Right. And so that really is the power. To me, there's a lot, and nobody really knows, right? I mean, to be upfront, like obviously this is a new technology where it's very nascent. It could go any number of ways. There is a lot of concern about it taking jobs from artists, taking jobs from writers, working, I get that. And I do think there is a risk of the studios trying to do that. I mean, ChatGPT is not a great screenwriter, in my opinion. So I'm not super concerned. That doesn't mean they wouldn't try to use it in all sorts of ways and try to cut down on the number of writers. They're going to do whatever they can to cut down on that kind of thing. But to me, the people we cut out were them. I mean, by using this technology, who was really cut out? Executives. I didn't need to go to them for anything, right? I think actually, so this is, I guess, my contrarian opinion. I think there's as much reason to believe that the jobs under threat are sort of middle management. I throw in a note to look like I'm doing something jobs at Netflix rather than actual artists, because what these tools can allow is you to do something like make a movie that would have cost tens of millions for under 20K, right? You don't need the green light from these people. You don't need their money. That's the potential I think it holds. And I think it's worth using them in a tasteful way to do that. I mean, I think anyone who's using it to try and replace work that's like more essential the tools aren't there yet to do that. I don't think if you're writing a screenplay, you want to outsource all your decisions to ChatGPT, right? That's just, it's not your screenplay. Like, being a writer, writing a screenplay, it's about making decisions, creative decisions in the work. If you're outsourcing it to the basically elaborate remixer, it's not really your screenplay anymore, And I think that shows anyway, like having tested ChatGPT for various writing purposes, great for replacing Google, right? Potentially, you can do searches on it. Great for helping you maybe brainstorm or outline a thing, but not great for actually writing a finished product or even like doing meaningful edits on it. And so I just think if the studios want to chase that dream, like let them, it's stupid. And really, it gives more power to people like us to make movies that 5 years ago would have been outside of our ability financially.
To follow up there really quick, another hot take from me, but it's going to lead into a question too. But I like what you said. I like what you said there about just accessibility in general, because here's the thing, as far as AI goes, like the big Hollywood studios are obviously trying to use it to cut down on their costs. But in a sense, you could look at it from our perspective, it's creating jobs in a sense, because would you have made this movie without these tools? Would you have hired that crew? Would you have hired those actors? Like for me personally, like I've had a script that I've wanted to make for 5 years at this point, I think even longer. And, I just can't do it because of one reason or another. So now that project doesn't exist. So my question is, what do you think are kind of the responsible ways to integrate AI into your process?
This is one thing that Brady and I have. We have a YouTube channel that is sort of our, it's our, call it our fun pet project, right? Because we both like sci-fi, and we like, we get a little weird on there, right? That's the best way to put it. But the one really cool thing with AI is, and like you said, Alex, you got a script that you haven't been able to do anything with for a number of years. Brady's had a few scripts, and we're just like, why don't we turn some of these scripts just into, like, let's make some concept trailers, just using AI, and see. And then like with YouTube, there's an audience there, and we could have some folks view the trailer, throw some comments, and see if it's kind of a way to gauge if a project might even be worth really like spending some more time on, and it wouldn't be, Brady recently dropped a video on the channel that's a trailer about the Russian beluga whale that was a spy and murdered, right? Like, it's a wild trailer, but it's made with all AI. I personally think it's hilarious, and it's worth a watch if you guys want to go to that. But something as simple as if a screenwriter has a script and they don't have the resources to go and do it themselves, there are enough AI tools out there that you can use even for free, or, pay some relatively meager subscription cost to, and you can make yourself a concept trailer, minute, 2 minute, however long you want that to be. And then you can use that as maybe even a tool to market it. At the end of the day, that's a marketing tool to market your script as well to other people that might make your project. So that can be a real value add. The only scary thing, and I don't want to come off as ever I'm like not, kind of taking a more of a critical lens on writers, because I was a writer myself, and my best pal here is a writer. But like, the one thing that writers seem to get really scared of is learning stuff that's not just writing, right? They get a little intimidated by that. And I can tell you, what's great about Brady is he's willing to kind of, at least try it out, like learn some new stuff, and, we can tell you from just our experience, like if we can do it, anybody can do it. You just kind of need to dedicate the time to it. If you've gone through some college classes, right? I'm not even saying you need a degree, you don't need a degree, right? But if you've gotten yourself through some college level classes, you could take these classes, and they're not that expensive of either, and it can really add value. And then with the really cool thing, like turning your writing into a visual product with AI, is it kind of helps you start to build the world of your story as well. You have a little visual snippet of what that world building is like for the project that you're working on.
Yeah. I mean, I think, in regards to using these tools tastefully, like you asked, I think it's really about keeping your eye on like, what's the vision, what's the purpose of this project? What's like the interesting thing about this project? Like, I don't think, like our Outrage is in many ways sort of a character drama, right? I mean, it's very important. The cast is really good. I'm not going to like replace their performances with AI or something, right? Like that's not worth watching. It's not interesting. I think there's, if something, say it's like very animation oriented, you want something that has a unique style. You want artists to have a unique style that fit your vision to work on the movie. I don't think replacing it with Midjourney is a great idea, but there are places where Midjourney is very helpful, especially if that's not the main for us. That's really just a giant expense that would put you making the movie out of reach. And then, like you said, there is no movie, right? There's just no project. There's nothing. So I think it's just keeping in mind what your vision is and like what's important to focus on, at the same, the concept trailers are great. If you have scripts, that the truth is people don't love reading scripts that often. I mean, right. They like having something. I mean, basically a concept trailer is just a rip reel and instead we're creating it with AI, right? So instead of pulling it from old TV shows or something, pulling all these scenes and trying to like Frankenstein a thing, we're just Frankensteining it with AI technology, and it's there's a little more control there. So I think these tools just open up a lot of opportunities that weren't there before for people, indie filmmakers, people that don't have access to a bunch of money or IP to kind of like realize their vision in a way that they just couldn't even like 5 years ago.
I understand the fear from the creatives out there, like with AI and, obviously with the writer's strike, that wasn't all that, 2 summers ago, you saw the picket lines, chat GBT's, not going to replace us and stuff, but you're saying it, so you're afraid of it. Right. And the thing is the AI, it can be used as a tool, and quite frankly, if you have enough confidence in yourself, that AI is not going to replace you. That was the way we looked at it. I can, Brady said it a lot more eloquently, but I'm like, no AI is going to write a better script than Brady. Right. And I can tell you that right now. Like, it's just impossible, maybe, years and years down the road when AI starts, turning into something really wild. It's like, sure, fine, 'cause that's another thing. But quite frankly, like right now, and even in the, in the near or midterm future, like if you're confident in your writing, that the tool, and especially if you've kind of messed around with the tool, the tools that are the AI tools that are out there, you already know, it's not going to like replace the quality that a good writer can make. The fear is that these larger organizations that we've kind of discussed, or these larger entertainment entities, they're always going to be looking to cut costs, right? Because they want to maximize profit. The public organizations, they have a responsibility to their shareholders to kind of keep the money train rolling. So yeah, I understand. Do we both understand the fear that's out there? Like, yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, that's where, just the confidence comes in, and confidence in your work. And then also, don't be afraid to reap some of the benefits that these tools can offer, because I'll say the same thing as Brady said. Like, ultimately, if utilized in the right way, it's going to open more doors for you.
So moving on to distribution, you guys mentioned earlier that you'd received some offers. I'm curious, like, how did that process kind of come about? And you've also mentioned that you've been able to pitch to Netflix and Hulu. So how did those things come about, and what ultimately led to the decision that you came to with picking a distributor?
So really, Neil mentioned him, but Glenn Reynolds, our lawyer and sales agent. I don't know if he loves answering to that title, but it's kind of what it was.
His title
saying.
So I mean, he is an attorney.
Right. That as well. Yeah, so, but he really helps indie filmmakers get their movie out to distributors, and really, you just have to send him a movie, and he has to think that it has a shot or not. He has to like it or not. And we sent him a rough cut in May of last year, and he loved it just off the rough cut. and we talked to him. Everything seemed great, so we went for it. And really, he has a list of distributors that he trusts, that he likes, and he took it out to them, including Netflix, Hulu, all the big players. And he sets you up in a way so you can sort of see what reactions are. We don't actually go into the room and pitch them or anything. He's sending them the movie. He's sort of touching base with who he sends it to, like, what do you think, and then gets back to us about how that went. And by September, we got one offer, and then into October, November, we got two more from some smaller distributors. But he gave us, and then going from there, it was really just what kind of deal are we getting? Neil and I looked at what the offers were. I met with a couple of the people at the distribution companies and talked to them, kind of got their approach to how they would do this and that for the movie. And it was really just about what's the split? Like, how long do they want to have the license for? What's their distribution plan? And are there any sort of costs that they're going to want to kind of recoup from revenue? And, we liked Indie Rights a lot. I liked Linda a lot, talked to Neil about it. And that's who we wanted to go with. We thought their deal was the best one.
We did have another offer from a distributor that was wanting to throw us some money right out the gate, right? And we ultimately turned that down because we wanted to maximize. Our whole thing was, and this was, we had discussed this as a part of our strategy prior to all this happening, that we wanted to have Outrage the most opportunity to get in front of the most possible eyes as possible. So which distributor was going to be able to put us on the most platforms or the bigger platforms? Like, how is Outrage going to get distributed to the largest possible audience possible?
Did you guys get an MG with Indie Rights?
Oh, no. Minimum guarantee, like money up front? No. And that's like fairly rare. And I think at this point, if you are getting a minimum guarantee, like money up front, that's very likely the only money they expect you to see, So I was a little distrustful. There were other terms in that deal I didn't love. And it just wasn't, it didn't make it worth it.
So with the other two deals, then you guys didn't get any sort of monetary offers then? It was just offers for distribution?
Yeah. And like a reasonable split.
Yeah, because the distributor is always going to take, so the distributor is going to take a percentage, right? And then they're also going to, they essentially own your project then for, that there's that amount of time that's built in. And sometimes, like we didn't want this, project to be owned for like 3 decades, because we're starting to do our math here. I'm like, how old will we be when we actually have the ability to maybe do something else with this finished product? And it's like, oh, we'll be collecting Social Security benefits by that, So there are those things you have to take into consideration too. Having a entertainment attorney working with us, very helpful. Just because, look, there's all different types of lawyers out there, right? And, you kind of need someone who's adept and familiar with these types of contracts and kind of knows, because, some of the reputations of the distributors that are out there might not be the best, right? So, and they have a track record that isn't great in terms, because, the way you're getting compensated with this is by no means, like a paycheck from a corporate job, right? It's different, and you're ultimately, like, things are getting taxed differently as well at the same time. So you definitely want to be partnered with a distributor that, has a good reputation and a good track record of kind of, of being above board.
So I haven't heard the word sales agent in a while. I thought those all kind of went away over the last couple of years. Definitely never heard of a sales agent / entertainment lawyer. So how did that relationship come about? And I guess what is your guys' advice there as far as finding either an entertainment lawyer or a sales agent in general?
I don't know if you were about to say this, Brady. We had our first sort of approach for how do we get this film distributed was, all right, let's try to, hammer this, fire this thing off to a bunch of festivals and see if we can get, lucky and get into one. Long story short there, we got into none of the festivals that we submitted to, but we also knew we needed another plan. We couldn't put, we couldn't put all our eggs in that basket. And Brady, just by happenstance, he had sent me an interview that our entertainment attorney or, sale distribution consultant, whatever, I mean, we just call him, Glenn Reynolds, right? He had just sent me a YouTube video of him doing an interview on another like bigger sort of movie entertainment industry YouTube channel, and he had sent me this YouTube video just to be like, hey, this has some good information in it, why don't you take a look, and then when I watched it, I was like, why don't we just email this guy and see and then maybe he'll respond back. And fortunately for us, was able to find his contact information just by listening to the interview, the YouTube, and sent a cold email out there, told him, this is what we've worked on, this is what we've completed. Could you maybe talk to us about your services or how that sort of works? And for him in particular, he had, obviously a little bit of a vetting process, which is, he wanted to see what we had to see if it was, going to be workable. Right. So by that time we had a rough cut of the movie complete. So not even the completed, the final cut. And from the rough cut, he kind of gave us the green light, and then we went into, negotiating our contract from there. And that's where then we transitioned into kind of the timeline that Brady had presented with the distributors. But, he was very, very helpful.
And we did some vetting of him as well. I mean, we did a little bit of, we didn't know the guy. I met and got coffee with him in person. Another benefit, I guess, of being in LA. And we also just looked at, his background, like simple things, IMDb Pro, what's his website look like? What other projects has he worked on? What do those filmmakers say about him? And he just had a really good reputation. There was no,
Yeah, that was the other thing. Like I had, when you're bringing on other folks who are going to be then taking a percentage of, your project, and, you're going to be hiring them, checking out like just basic stuff, right? Like LinkedIn, but then another thing that I did was I was like, okay, I'm going to sort of being a former reporter, I'm going to try to see if I could find any dirt on this guy. Right. And I scoured the internet, on, so yeah, kudos, Glenn, if you watch this. Couldn't find anything, I may have told him this, I may not, but I mean, I couldn't find anything bad, anything bad about him, in like because usually if someone, if folks are on a, if they have their stuff listed and they, if they have, kind of exhibited some poor behavior and, business contracts and partnerships in the past, you'll get somebody who will jump into the comment section or something like that. Like, I worked with so-and-so in '09 or whatever, and they did X, Y, and Z, and, F them, right? I went through hundreds of comments and found none of that, so I just, we kind of made the decision that, couldn't find anything negative. Everything was above board. And then obviously Brady and being able to, meet him in person. And then, we had, a meeting obviously, and it went from there, and he's, extremely helpful. He's been great.
So how's your guys' experience with indie rights been so far? Because the movie's been out for a little bit right now. You guys chose them because, you seem to like what they had to say. So I guess what's been like the post-distribution process, or just post-distribution experience been like for you guys?
So far, it's been pretty good. I mean, they communicate. If I email them, they're pretty responsive. We're still waiting to get it on some of these other platforms, but I know part of the main strategy is to kind of play out Amazon for as long as possible as like the sole source. It's only been out for it's been out for a couple months now. And we knew going in, literally two. We knew going in they weren't going to do any marketing. They were very upfront about that, but they were also upfront that they're not going to charge us for any of that, and that was sort of an issue with some of the other offers. So marketing is the key thing, obviously, but really any distributor you pick, you're going to have to do your own marketing at this level, I think. And it's super important to kind of know how to do that. And like Neil was saying, work with someone like Justin from as early on as possible to really like build a foundation for that. I would say, some people, sometimes there's some confusion about this. Like, what do you even need a distributor for? I mean, Amazon used to let you just self-distribute on their platform, but that's not really the case anymore. If you want to get on a site like Tubi, you need a relationship there. I guess if you want to like really DIY it and like make your own distribution company as well and go that route, I mean, maybe you could pull that off. We don't want to do that. At least we didn't want to do that now. And they bring a lot of expertise with this that I value. They were helpful in the marketing in this sense. They send out pretty clear instructions on strategies that have worked for other films they have. And they have a pretty deep backlog of films that they've distributed. That's been helpful, things we wouldn't have thought of, maybe strategies, things like that. And they're very above board, and at least so far pretty transparent. We won't see the first kind of revenue breakdown from them until the summer, but my understanding is they're very transparent about that. And transparency is incredibly rare in this business, so I value it a lot. Yeah, so far it's been great.
No, I agree. I mean, there hasn't been any surprises, right? And that's usually kind of what, shuns people away. There's always negative. I saw some of the, before we decided to, kind of give the thumbs up to indie rights, kind of did the same vetting process. I'm like, I'm going to try to find some dirt, and see if the waters are muddied. And yeah, there's some folks who, you read through the negative reviews, and you kind of have to look through them through the lens of where they're coming from too. And some of the negative reviews that I saw, I looked at it, I'm like, well, what did you expect, man? Like this, or, you get some, because you can, for indie rights, if you go to their website, if you're just an indie filmmaker, you can just submit to them. You don't need a sales agent, right? Or an attorney that's helping you, right? So you can do that, and maybe you hear from them, maybe you don't. We obviously had someone that was working, for us, advocating for us, that had already a pre-established relationship and a successful track record, right, in the past. So obviously that's kind of why our stuff was moved on top of the pile. Because I can't imagine how many submissions they do get a month. I'm sure it's a lot, So that was, you'd see a lot of negative commentary about that. Like, oh, I've tried to submit multiple times and never heard anything, or, so, I read a lot of the negative stuff, and I didn't find a lot of it to be applicable to our particular situation. And then I also just kind of, you can see when, you got a creative that's just bad because maybe nobody liked their stuff, and I can resonate with that. Somebody's proud of the work that they made and they thought that, it was going to be good. Maybe that just wasn't the right distributor for them. There might have been a different one. I wouldn't even dissuade that person from sending, send your stuff off to if you got a finished product that you can send it off to as many people that are willing to look at it. This stuff is very subjective too at the same time. But for our experience with indie rights has been good. And they, I promote the movie on my own social media platforms, and, they'll always give you a reshare to their audience, whether I'm using X or LinkedIn, so it's been good. And we've had our movie reviewed by a couple of reviewers who, fortunately they like the movie. And, the distributor's been good about, kind of firing those off across their platforms as well, which is, more promotion for Outrage.
One thing I'm curious when it comes to the money making process, I'm a single member LLC, so I just own my LLC outright. I don't have an LLC for my movie. Did you guys create an LLC specifically for this movie, or do you just have kind of like an umbrella company? And are you guys in a partnership? Because like I've produced a couple of feature films. Like I've worked on other people's feature films where I'm just kind of coming in as myself and just, slapping my logo on it, as opposed to like being a part of their company. So how is that kind of set up for you guys?
Yeah, we're an LLC, and we made one specifically for the movie. I think if you're somewhere else, so California, I mean, at least for working with the kind of budget we are, the LLC, the tax that you need to pay, the costs to set up the LLC are pretty steep. So, in an ideal world, I think Neil and I would have sort of a production company LLC and then also an LLC for the movie. But, that's something we're going to kind of explore going forward. For this, we just made an LLC for the movie. And that was also partly because we gave some of the people who worked on it equity in this LLC so that they'll have, they'll have back end. That was our way of giving back end. I would say, yeah, I mean, I think if nothing else, you could just start doing that. Like you could just make an LLC for each movie, so that you can operate that way and keep costs down. But again, I mean, it depends on where you're at. Like other states have really small costs to setting up an LLC, in which case it might make sense to start with like a production company so you can kind of build a brand. I mean, that's something I think you want to try and do. I haven't, in terms of like working on someone else's project, and I guess it's just something about working it out with them. And the thing to keep in mind is like there's how to protect yourself. So that's partly why you set up an LLC, partly so you can share back end with people if that's how you're kind of paying them or making deals. And then there's the brand aspect. And I think if you can build your brand, you should that's probably the biggest thing. That's key.
So for this movie specifically though, are you the single owner of this LLC, or are you guys sharing that together?
We share it together. Well, so we have shares, and then we have voting shares, and Neil and I have the voting shares. That's how we set it up. And then the others are kind of silent partners.
If the movie makes money, how exactly do you guys have that worked out? Because that's something I would like to offer people in the future too, and I haven't quite figured out the logistics there. So how do you guys have that set up? So say we make $20,000 and then you guys get 10% each afterwards, right? Like how do you kind of have that set up to pay people What's your strategy there? Like, are you going to pay people like quarterly or something like that? Or like, I'm really curious about like this is getting real into the weeds. And if you're still listening at this point, we're deep if you haven't noticed, but like, I'm very interested in that part selfishly for myself.
Look, it's a benefit for anybody, really, right? So like the way the LLC is, it's the purpose of the LLC is nobody gets paid until the LLC makes its money back, right? So it's a protection for the original investors, which is myself and Brady, right? So the people who have equity which we use the points industry term or just percentages, right? They don't see any returns on it until the original until the LLC is made whole, right? So the costs of the production and everything like that, right? Which we have like the total tally of what needs to like break even. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, Brady, but I believe the way we worked it out was like, okay, he and I are going to take 80% and then we'll dole out. We have 20 percentage points to play with.
Yeah, that's roughly right. Something like that. Yeah.
I think that was the figure. And then we doled out various like points based on, folks' role in the project. If they had a larger role, then, they received a couple of more points than if they just had, say, if they were just going to be there for just say like a couple days or whatever of the filmmaking process. So, that was how we kind of worked that out. I mean, Brady had some bad experiences in the past, in terms of like collaboration with partners, with creative partners where, percentage splits and everything like that always got goofy and then created rifts and friction. So we've always sort of been on the stand, from the posture of let's figure out the splits first before we even start moving down these roads. So there's just no ambiguity about it in the future. I think when Brady and I were negotiating how much percentage equity we would have, I think that conversation was like 3 minutes where, Brady was just like, I would be happy with this. And I was like, okay, what do you need that's going to make you happy and still be fair to me? And then, it was like a 60-second conversation, but we had tackled a lot of that stuff, leading up to that, to where that wasn't an issue. Because that does, I mean, it's not just, for you, Alex, for anybody who's wanting to do something like this, splitting up equity on a big project like this, it can be problematic.
Yeah, it was all pretty smooth though. I mean, and yeah, it just operates like any company, basically. I mean, there's the liabilities of the company that need to be taken into account before any profit gets shared among people, And I mean, obviously we want as much profit to go to ourselves and our partners, the people who helped us and, have equity in the movie. And we want them to get as much money as possible. I mean, we want all of us to get as much money as possible, right? And they were great about that. And I was as generous as I think I could be when it came to giving equity. And I wanted people to feel like they had a real stake in what we were doing,
So when you guys do end up, making you make your money back and all that, in terms of like your payout schedule, because like the revenue from films can be minuscule sometimes too, especially if it takes you 5+ years to make your money back. Now, if the movie makes, like $10 in a quarter, are you paying, divvying out that 20%, and everybody's just getting a check for 5 cents, which, I know is not uncommon as far as residuals. So like, I'm curious, like, you're going to pay people out like yearly, or like, what's that kind of process look like?
That's just going to go to, I don't even know, pay up, but it'll probably just sit there until we can get more money. I think if possible, we will pay out quarterly whenever we get money coming in.
Generally speaking, there's a threshold for payment, right? Like, we're not going to be sending somebody a check for a nickel. Like, but we would, fortunately, we have an open line of communication with all the folks who have equity in the project. So, generally standard operating procedures, we establish just a payment threshold for them. Like, hey, look, as long as it's say $50 or $100, that would be like the minimum threshold. And we'd pay that out to you, on a quarterly basis and hopefully this doesn't happen, right? Because we want the people that worked with us to get rewarded, because everybody did an awesome job, right? So if the worst case scenario where it's just like, we didn't make the threshold, we'll just roll it over into the next quarter, and then go from there.
So my last kind of topic here is marketing, because you guys, when you initially emailed me, you guys talked about how marketing, you wish you would have, and you talked about this earlier too. You wish you would have been a little more strategic as far as your marketing. So I guess, what is your advice there? Like, what did you guys do? What do you wish you would have done? I know you talked about how you didn't really get any film festivals. How did the reviews work? And like, what kind of tips, like even just some baseline tips, did Indie Rights offer you guys?
Well, Indie Rights made it, I guess, before you go, Bray, I'll say, Indie Rights made it pretty clear that the marketing's not really in the deal, right? Like, they'll kind of
No paid
piggyback
marketing,
off of what we're doing. Yeah, no paid marketing, right? So we knew that going in, which is fine.
It's sort of like what Neil was talking about with Justin. In another world, like, I guess, think about some portion of your budget going to marketing from early on. We didn't really have, immediately. We didn't really have much of a budget, right? So, but at the same time, even whatever amount you can think, keep it aside, try to consider that you're going to have to start marketing and start thinking about it early on. If there's a way to kind of like appeal, if your movie at all appeals to any kind of niche, start trying to appeal to that niche as early as possible, and have someone kind of dedicated to that. Because like Neil was saying too, if you're in pre-production, you're in production, whatever stage you're in, kind of before you're in having a movie getting released, you don't you have all these other things to focus on, right? You kind of want someone to have that be their whole shtick, is just marketing the movie.
The things filmmakers can do immediately for free, right? It's keyword, the winning word, right? No money, is you definitely want to get some social media accounts right out the gate, and just, like, our approach for those was just to start, kind of loading those up with content with like Instagram and Facebook. Easy thing for us to do was, get some behind the scenes, pick some posts on there, just so folks kind of have a place to sort of look at, like, what could this movie be about? And then it's also another place to put, a trailer or clips of the movie, that you want. So that can be done pretty low lift, and can be done at no cost. We had a landing page established as well, which is helpful because that can be a sort of a living thing, right? Where you can add to it. For example, now I think we have some reviews on there, and then, where you can buy the movie, right? Like the link to where you can go to Amazon to rent or purchase it. So that can be done right out the gate. Definitely filmmakers can do that. Even in the script writing process, they can they can have a web page for themselves if they know they're going to make it. Like, just have it, it's not going to hurt. Like, there's no negative to this. Right. And then what Brady was saying, having a chunk of your budget dedicated to it at the gate. I understand that's obviously hard. It was hard for us. We knew like the marketing piece was sort of like the rain cloud we knew we were going to have to address, but we were just like, man, we just like do not have the funds, but the thing is that, if you can just sort of earmark, a relatively meager sum, maybe it's just a couple of $100, you'll be able to run some Facebook ads for a month or two on just a couple of $100. And, maybe you don't think that's going to be much of an impact, but it's better than not doing it. Right. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like it's just better than having zero. So ideally, if you can have a couple of $1,000, right, to just say that, this is going to be spent for marketing, and then, maybe, having somebody like run the socials for you for a little while, that's like pretty helpful. And then also kind of circling back to how some of these AI tools can be helpful. You can use some of the AI tools to help you market as well, whether it's like creating a newsletter, right? Or, like using them as tools to build your own marketing content. Like we made a press package, right? That was, utilized. So for our outreach, how we were able to, get in touch with you, Alex, but, that's something that you could do in the beginning, like from before you even start filming as well. And I think it ultimately, it's all this stuff, like if a filmmaker or, screenwriter can kind of jump on this stuff as soon as possible, and it's less, then they can really focus on the things you can focus on the fun stuff, which is making the thing.
How did you guys get reviewed? Because I know like Film Thread, for an example, you can submit to get reviewed. So that one's pretty easy, but I noticed you had a couple others that you listed to me. So as far as like getting reviewed, what is your advice there?
Well, some of it is just, some of them are just pay to play, but you want to limit to like ones that are actually had an audience and, seem like legitimate reviewers. They're not just sort of whatever, throw me a couple bucks, I'll give you a great rating. You don't want that stuff because everybody sees through that. It's not great. But it's a great place to start in a way because other journalists, we have this press packet. We're still doing outreach. If there's some reviews up, I think it lends credibility. Oh, like, another legitimate reviewer liked it, So it's at least a good place to start. And then it's just about any kind of sales approach. You just sort of have to play the numbers and keep on it, I think.
I send out outreach to, you try to do as much as you can. I mean, you have to understand the other perspective is that, you're asking, say you approach a Rotten Tomatoes critic, right? You got to remember, you are asking somebody to take, in our case, our movie is a little over 90 minutes, right? So we're asking you to take an hour and a half out of your day. And then I'm also asking you to write, couple 500,000 words on something as well. And that, like a skilled writer could probably crank that out in, less than an hour or so, but maybe other writers just tend to take a little more time on that. So it's, I always looked at it as like, I'm asking someone to take a half day, just for us. And you kind of need to respect that. So, that being said, you send out a lot of outreach, you don't get a lot of responses, and, using that model of, hey, we are asking people to take a whole half day to do this, it doesn't hurt your ego as much, right? If you're not hearing anything back, too. And then like Brady was saying, you do want to make sure whoever you're reaching out to is going to give your, like doing too much pay to play, right? People do see through that. The sites that we did, the services that we did utilize where we did have to throw them, and it's not a bunch of money, it's the cost of pizza and a soda, right? Like it's not that bad. But like we saw on their website, yeah, they did, like crap on some movies, that maybe were, so you do want somebody to give your film an honest take, like it's, you don't want the data to be manipulated in that regard, because that's, if you're trying to establish a brand, right, you want that brand to be, quality, and you want people to kind of trust in the product that you're producing. So, be careful. You definitely want to be careful not to just approach folks who are like in the same echo chamber, right, as you. That's not going to help.
As far as, maybe things that I've missed or anything like that, do you guys have any kind of final pieces of advice or things that you want to leave on? Because I know this is a lot, and it's a lot for people to take in. So I'm curious if you have any kind of final thoughts about anything.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think one area we didn't touch on too much, and it's totally fine, is just the film festival thing. And in our world, that is like a big facet of it often, and people are really into getting into the festivals and stuff. I think just what I would say about that is like, in retrospect, I had a certain feeling about it. I thought like all or nothing. We should go to only the biggest, and if we don't get in, we don't get in. Anywhere where there wasn't going to be sales agents, or not sales agents, buyers, I just thought was like not worth our time. In retrospect, maybe there's benefits that I didn't think about from going to some of the more attainable festivals, we'll say, especially for like smaller movies. But it's really try to make something that a distributor would want, I think, rather than worry too much about festivals. And when you're starting out, there's benefit to having the validation and like getting the laurel leaves and whatever. But I think sometimes in our world, there's like a lot of people are just super concerned with getting into whatever festival or the biggest festivals. And at the level we're working at, if you don't have major stars in your movie, like Sundance is just not realistic, right? But everybody wants to try to take their shot. Yeah, so it's weird. It's a balance. I mean, I think depending on what you're doing, it can make sense, but it can also make sense to kind of like we did, just go straight for the jugular and try to get distribution.
I mean, especially on the festival thing, even though that route didn't work out for us in particular on this project, we're still happy we did it. I mean, that cost us money, and I mean, you can kind of beat yourself up and be like, oh, that was a throw. The festival submissions, they add up, a couple, $100 here, $200 there, right? That's money. It's not insignificant, but the thing is you're not going to know unless you know. And you can woulda, coulda, shoulda all day long until you actually do the thing. So, I mean, my like big thing, my advice for anybody, really anybody that is wanting to do this, or they've, seen maybe not the success that they have seen, or they're still kind of trying to figure it out. It's worth the risk if you really believe that you've done, you've produced something, you've written down something great. Like it's worth it, like put your chips in on yourself and take that chance. That being said, just make sure you set yourself up for success too, or stack the deck as much as you can in your favor, whether that's bringing in people you trust, advisors, utilizing all these platforms that might that may help you, like social media, artificial intelligence tools. Don't be afraid to maybe try to learn some new things, right? Like take a class, or, when Brady has talked about some of the classes he's taken, which has introduced him to some new tools as well. But when he first was, when we first started talking about it, which was well before we even thought about making a movie, he just brought this class up to me. I was like, yeah, man, take it. Like, do it. Why not? Like worse Worst case scenario, you end up meeting some cool people and you have some fun, right? So that's the worst case scenario. And then at the end of the day, stuff like that ended up bringing value to us in the future because it's also expanded our, network as well. And we utilize some of that network to kind of help us with this particular project. So, to kind of sum it all up, my best piece of it is advice is, nothing's going to happen right with a finished script unless something happens, unless there's some action with it, and it's really, really easy to get caught up in all the negatives that kind of come with how competitive the industry is and the unknowns of where it's going. The fact of the matter is like, we don't really have a whole lot of control over that, but if you still really want to do it, let your work speak for itself, for sure. I mean, I have, like, I think this community is a really great community because everybody kind of has the same goal. They want their work to be seen or made and seen. Right. And I think that's a really unifying goal as well. So, there are a lot of folks within this community who are happy to help you just, but the only thing is like, you're not going to be able to make that connection unless you reach out type deal. Kind of like, how we're sitting here talking to you, Alex. So, yeah.
Neil, Brady, I thank you so much for being here today. I mean, I wasn't expecting to get an absolute masterclass on making low budget features today like that. I was just like, I literally got to the 90-minute mark and I was at question 6 that I'd written down. So that kind of shows you how much I'm improving here with the questions. Where can people learn more about Outrage? Where can they learn more about you? Go ahead and plug away anything that you guys want to plug.
Yeah. So, you can see Outrage on Amazon Prime. The easiest way to find it, go in the search bar, type in Outrage 2024. That'll make it pop right up. We have both Brady and I are active on X as well. My handle is just Neil_Fotre, so I'm pretty easy to find. Brady's Brady C. Nelson, I believe, and then
B-Nell's #1, so a little harder, but.
Or B-Nell's #1, the only one, right? B-Nell's #1. We do have Outrage social accounts as well, Facebook, X account, and Instagram. But really, it'd be great if you all would, check out the movie if you like it. Drop a review. The distributors and the algorithms like that stuff as well. So, we'd be appreciative for that, and if you're looking for you're into some more of the outlandish or sci-fi genre, come check out our House Azure channel on YouTube.
I want to give another huge shout out to Brady and Neil for coming on the channel and being so candid. I mean, this was an extremely long interview. I try not to make the interviews this long, but they just gave me so many opportunities to discuss so many different factors. So, I mean, you got an entire film school in this video. I hope you guys realize that. They are just an absolute wealth of knowledge. And I can't thank them enough for coming on and just, talking to me for so long. So definitely check out their film Outrage. Definitely check out all of their social medias. I wish I would have asked them about their future projects, but, I'm sure I'll have them back on the channel at some point and we can discuss more about that. So thank you again, guys, so much for watching. If you like this video or found it helpful, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you want to help support me personally, of course, my film, Cashing Out, is linked in the description below. But other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.